And now we're recording. And I would like to start off with a land acknowledgement. Spaces recognizes the land upon which our building resides as the ancestral homeland of the Haudenosaunee and other Great Lakes tribes. We further acknowledge the thousands of Indigenous people who now call this region home as a result of forced migration, dispossession of ancestral homelands and territories, and other reasons. We affirm their right as past, present, and future caretakers of this land. We make this statement recognizing that intentionally or not, we have participated in ongoing settler colonialism, a term that is generally recognized to mean the removal, erasure, and supplantation of Indigenous peoples. We commit to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. A bit about Spaces. Spaces is the resource and public forum for artists who explore and experiment. We are the only alternative art organization in Ohio that solely commissions new artist projects, serving as a national model for how to materialize artists' ideas and interact with audiences. Our success is rooted in providing artists the kind of support rarely seen outside major institutions, which has led to ambitious new projects that have reached an international stage and expanded artists' practices. And to introduce our artist, Kara Goot is a multidisciplinary artist whose primary focus is image-based digital media. Her work investigates the new shape of human intimacy formed by internet lifestyle, constructed detachment from reality, and the power dynamics of the virtual. She received an MFA from Cranbrook Academy of Art in 2016. Solo shows include Presence at IRL Gallery in Cincinnati, Ohio, and Crystal Magic Weapon at Open Space, Baltimore, Maryland. Recent group shows include Dystopian Party Collection at Spas Seitun, Moscow, and No es propio de esta época at La Cigarras Cultural Center in Alicante, Spain. She has exhibited internationally at the Chromatic Festival in Montreal, the Tbilisi Architecture Biennial, and Azkuna Zentroa, Bilbao, among others. Most recently, she was awarded the Ohio Arts Council Individual Excellence Award and the Mohawk Show Judges' Choice Award for her publication, RPG Gothic. She is a 2021 alumni of the Pioneer Works Tech Residency. Kara currently lives and works in Cleveland, Ohio. And I'm gonna just, on one last note, for everybody who just joined us, I'm gonna ask that you please fill out the visitor form that I drop in the chat. Keeping track of who comes to our programs is how Spaces is able to stay free and open to the public. So I just dropped that in the chat. And without further ado, I'm gonna hand it over to Kara.
Hi everybody. Thanks for coming, and thank you to Spaces. Thank you, Layla and Tiziana, for facilitating this talk and giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about my work. Thank you for that intro. That kind of said most of the things that I was going to say at this first slide. I went to OSU for undergrad. I went to Cranbrook for grad school, and now I live in Cleveland, here in Cleveland. I work for Ann Hamilton in Columbus, and I kind of just travel back and forth between the two cities constantly. This talk is going to be kind of vaguely chronological and mostly focused on video work, but I do make image and sculpture work, but those are usually directly informed by my video practice, so I really wanted to get into the video aspect of my work. And so hopefully everyone can see my screen. I wanted to start out by reading this quote from Hito Steyl from a lecture she gave at the New School in 2013. I feel like it helps get right to the core of what a lot of my work addresses. So I'm just going to go ahead and read it right now. Reality consists by now largely of images, of failed images, of things camouflaged as images, of constellations and processes which were formerly evident as images. And as they crossed the screen, they became transformed irrevocably. They were translated, they were misunderstood, they were senselessly inflated, or came under the axe of austerity. But this also means that we cannot understand this so-called reality anymore without understanding cinema, photography, 3D modeling, printing, all of these imaging techniques, because these constitute reality now. The world is imbued with the shrapnel of former images. It's edited, it's photoshopped, it's cobbled together from spam and scrap. Reality is post-produced and scripted. An affect is rendered as an after effect. By now, we live within the afterlives of images. If reality is post-produced, then it also means that we can change it by post-production. We can reverse Photoshop it. We can intervene into reality with imaging techniques. The question may no longer be what is represented in images or how do we read images. These remain important, but additional questions are, which images do we want to become real? How do we change reality by means of post-production? How can it be edited? And so I feel like starting off with that, just as a primer to kind of get into the video work, is a good way to really frame what I'm talking about with some of these pieces. So building off that quote, I wanted to show a clip from a video I made from 2017 called He Wishes for the Cloths of Heaven. It uses this concept of a post-produced reality. It's a collection of appropriated footage of people with their homemade or store-bought weapons. All the weapons in this video are based on weapons from video games. And I think of these DIY weapons as digital artifacts. They're basically like artifacts born out of mediation. They are objects first created solely to exist in digital space and have now been imperfectly translated into physical space by mostly by fans and enthusiasts. At the time, I was thinking about fandoms and how we align ourselves with concepts that have only ever existed in digital or symbolic space, and how cosplay and recreation can be an act of love or an act of desire. And all of these clips demonstrate a sort of performance of like what I call longing for the image of something that like never physically existed. And so the title takes its name from a poem, He Wishes for the Cloths of Heaven by William Butler Yeats. And then the poem is read throughout the video on top of all these appropriated clips. So I'm just going to play a little clip from that. So
let's begin. Had I the heavens embroidered cloths?
So that was just a short clip of He Wishes for the Cloths of Heaven. Let me skip ahead here. There we go. The next project I want to talk about is kind of a continuation of this idea, but kind of working from a place of like sort of modification and modifying a video game. So kind of working around from a different aspect of coming out from digital space into physical space. We're kind of modding digital space and installing mods on top of a video game. So this is a performance that I have been working on since 2015. A mod is modification files that are installed over top of video games to augment or change the behavior of the game. There are thousands of free, like functioning mods available for the video game Skyrim, which is what this video depicts. I began working on this project in 2015 and have just continued creating these compilation videos from it. I use the resources available from the huge modding community around Skyrim to get me started and kind of taught myself how to mod. The mod that I'm using for this video is called Immersive Lover's Comfort by Flex Creator. And it's made so to allow your character to kiss another character within the game Skyrim, because that is not allowed in the normal game. So it was a modification to allow intimacy with your partner. It causes the avatars to join at the mouth and then ragdoll to the floor. But the more, as more mods are installed on top of that mod, the more like glitchy it becomes, the crazier it gets. And it turns the act of kissing into this crazy glitched dance, and the characters ragdoll out of control. And so from there, I started placing them on top of mountains and buildings and kind of anywhere where they could fall from a distance to create that performance, like just to lengthen it and kind of augment it further. And then each fall I recorded as its own performance and then created compilations from the best falls. So with this work, I'm kind of asking questions like, does mediation through digital space take us further away from visceral human experience, or does it somehow bring us closer? Does the removal of a real body take along with it our sense of humanity, or does it release us from the inhibitions that we maintain through having a body? And then maybe in the absence of our real bodies, an entirely new language of performance can occur. And so with that alternative mode of expression, it's like not tied to physical identities. And what does that new performance look like? And I wanted to read a quote really quickly from Legacy Russell from Glitch Feminism. Avatars can become rhetorical bodies, ones that challenge how and why we perform our abstract and varied selves towards the goal of becoming our truer selves, both on and offline. So I'm going to play a little clip from Intimacy Mod.
Waiting. Need something? Hmm?
So from there, I moved into kind of this next aspect of the performance, which was to do a live version of basically what I was recording. So this is called Intimacy Mod Live, and it was initially performed as part of Performance Proxy in Detroit, which was curated by RF Curatorial. And then recently I was able to do it as Kuna Zentroa in Bilbao. I was not physically present but it was very cool and exciting to kind of, you know, do something like outside of my immediate kind of experience. So this was live streamed and shown via projector into the gallery space. There was also a laptop present so that the viewers could take request or put requests into the chat function. And I had like an entire Skyrim menu available to choose from. So viewers could choose character models, outfits, couple pairings, and like locations for me. And then they communicated those to me via chat, and I was able to input those commands and then perform each of those kisses wherever they wanted me to. And so I kind of viewed it as this like proxy relationship for the relationship between performer and audience. And so it's acting as this imperfect translation between myself and the viewer, kind of like an imperfect translation of what we each desire, and kind of reaching across space to have an intimate moment. And so this next video I made in 2019. It was a commission for Art Night London. It's called Non-Space Canon Beta. It was inspired by the concept of the game manual or like game Bible. I wanted to create a sort of canon that tried to describe like the entirety of digital space, but in this like enormous task of trying to describe it, it becomes broken, or it's like incomplete in many ways, and it falls apart. And so for this, for the video, I used this free demo program called SitePal to animate a stock photo, which is what you see here in this first thumbnail, who then she acts as a narrator in the video and sort of your kind of some kind of guide and someone to explain the canon to you, to explain like the entirety of digital space. But it quickly, she becomes unhelpful and leaves and gets distracted, and it's just like kind of, it just breaks down immediately. This video is split into chapters, which is like a fictional, these fictional sections of the canon, and the final chapter is called Becoming, and it's about stepping into the non-space and becoming part of this and becoming a virtual entity, essentially. And that is a concept that carried me into the current piece at Spaces, which I'll be talking about a little later. So I thought this was kind of important to show as like building, kind of like the building blocks of what I was working on at Spaces.
Oh, it's you. I wasn't expecting you quite yet. You are not a stranger, or much of a traveler. I know you, and have walked with you. Will you come here to stay? Do you come here to the non-space to feel joy or pain? Or both?
beta video. You skip ahead here. Oops. So the next video that I worked on right after that was called Defense Formation AU. And this video introduces the concept of AU, which means alternate universe. It's a fan fiction trope that rewrites the subject of the fan fiction within a completely different setting or alternate universe. So in the video, the author of the AU has become completely lost within their own universe that they're at a point where they can either fight back to reality and essentially use reality as the antidote, or become completely swallowed by their own creation. I use the same SitePal software to animate the image of Jim Carrey, specifically Jim Carrey at the end of The Truman Show, which is a movie about a man living his life inside a reality TV show. Because he, at that moment, in that image, it's the point at which he is faced with the decision to leave the alternate universe created for him, or for an unknown reality, or stay with his familiarity, but know that this universe is sort of this false, this fantasy world. And the video sort of just talks about the alternate universe's origin story, the one that the author has created for themselves. And we find out it's made from like these ridiculous kind of DIY internet objects, like a homemade green screen, artificial animated flames, and a PowerPoint presentation. It's kind of like this cobbled together thing, poorly animated stock backgrounds, and it's all brought together and fixed in place through a sort of digital baptism. So I'm going to play just a little clip of that as well.
It is time for you to make a decision. Stay here, inside the AU, or leave forever.
Who are you?
AU stands for alternate universe. For example, Twilight AU, where the genders are switched but not in a life and death way, but in a Bella with a Cullen and Edward wasn't way. For example, Harry Potter AU, where Harry is born a year later, doesn't need anyone in particular as Madame Malkin or on the train, and is subsequently sorted into Slytherin. It is not a question of real or unreal. The AU forms the core of your being. It is that which is in you more than yourself.
I have my very own son. You are the son. I have done it. I have. Yes, I did it.
Do you remember when you made this place? I can help you remember.
Okay, then from there, I worked on a video called 3 Manipulations, kind of during the height of like quarantine time in 2020. The title is called 3 Manipulations. It's a reference to 3 Transitions by Peter Campus. And essentially it's 2 texts on either side of the screen that represent 2 separate people or entities. And it's never really clear who or what they are. They're chatting inside what seems to be some sort of dating app or like virtual sex line. And they say things like, "What are you wearing?" To get the conversation started. And at one point, one of the entities says, "Over time, you begin to rot, and I'm replacing each rotting piece one by one," which is a reference to the ship of Theseus, which is a thought experiment that imagines a ship being replaced board by board over years until eventually all the boards have been replaced. And it asks the question, is this ship still the original ship, or has it become a new ship because it is completely replaced? And at what point did it become a new ship? And I wanted to apply that ship of Theseus to our perceptions of other people, especially those that we encounter like anonymously online. And at what point do they move from unknown to known? Is the mediation of the screen keeping us from understanding one another, or is it creating a space to see that maybe we've never quite understood each other in the first place? And now we're freer than ever to manipulate our worldviews, manipulate our visions of others, and kind of make images become real, like Hito said at the beginning of the talk. So then last year I created this piece while I was in residence at Pioneer Works. It draws on a lot of the previous themes and imagery using text-to-speech voices, appropriated footage, demo programs to create content. And it again pits two viewpoints against each other. One character claims that mediation has saved them. They say it was my first protector, and it's based on a character. It's a version of myself basically in middle school, discovering that I had an easier time talking to people online, like on AOL Instant Messenger, rather than in person. And the second character claims that life before technology and even before modern times was a better time. It was more authentic. It was and that we're now crushed and disillusioned by the complications of modern life. And I wanted to read a little quote from an essay called Living in the Phantasm of Demediation, which is like the coolest title ever. This neo-medievalism takes two forms: a nostalgic conservatism, pinning a fantasy of social stability on its representation of the Middle Ages, and a vision of the Middle Ages as an era that was more authentic, spiritual, and closer to nature. And as I was working on this video, I was also watching a lot of MMA with my partner, as you do. And there were a lot of Marines recruiting commercials at that time that were just running constantly, in which they kind of echo this sentiment where they say, searching for meaning in a relentless world, always connected but somehow alone, trapped by illusion, we offer another path, which is kind of like pretty chilling. But for someone who took comfort in mediation, who now looks to digital space as a symbolic space of processing, like imbuing digital material with fantasy out of sometimes like as a survival mechanism, which I feel like is very common for a lot of people's experiences. So like these two viewpoints kind of pitted against each other, pro and anti-mediation, collide kind of in this video, the similar but opposite mythologies. And I wanted to explore that twisting of the trope of fantasy and the way that they sort of contort around each other. And then the final, I'm just going to show this final part of the video, is the mediated being returning to check on the viewer and to sort of explain their argument for being mediated, and that it's sort of inherent to our contemporary condition. So I'm going to play just a little bit of that.
You miss me. Did you learn something? I've been waiting for you. Here's what I learned. No statement says all that could be said. No pastoral visit brings wholeness. No program accomplishes the mission. It will never be enough. I will always be too much for the world. So I want you to paint me in. I want you to imagine me how I am, just a collection of desires, steering through a moonless night. What I am is beyond your vision, and what you are is beyond mine.
Nope, don't play again. Okay, now I want to talk about another thing I worked on at Pioneer Works last year called Welcome to My Desert Nexus, which was a live 3-act play set within a video game. And with this project specifically, I wanted to ask, how can a play transcend stage and screen to create some sort of new kind of performance in this like hybrid middle space? It takes place within the video game Red Dead Redemption Online. It's an open world online game set in a fictionalized version of the Western US in the late 1800s. I was initially drawn to the game because of how exaggerated its take was on the final frontier and like the glamorization of cowboys, and the setting of this play is sort of, it just sort of stuck in my mind as like the ultimate analogy for how we view or once viewed the internet as the final frontier as well, and the problematic nature of that. And basically it begins with two men riding horses in the desert and talking about kind of just like their existential place within it all. And so I wanted to, let's see. Okay, so here's an image of it taking place live. It was set in person as well as on Twitch. And this was something that took place in June of last year. I had 3 performers and myself sitting up on the stage. And so everyone was controlling an avatar while I was live mixing the viewpoints so that whoever was speaking was showing up on the projector behind everyone. And it was also what was being shown on Twitch live. And so it was also online in an open world. So whoever was in the game at the time could also watch the play if they wanted to, or like interrupt it and kind of like end it if they wanted to. They could have killed everyone and kind of just walked away. But for some reason that didn't happen with this iteration. It happened many times while we were practicing, but there were no interruptions in the final piece. And also another interesting aspect of like the physical component was that we had a whole like AV setup, so, and lighting setup. So the stage lights responded to the conditions of the game. So when it was nighttime, it was like night lighting, and daytime it was day lighting, or during a storm, it was a different type of lighting. And so it really mimicked like, or increased the feeling that this was like a hybrid situation. And I wanted the stage to kind of resemble a live gaming event, kind of like those that you would see like for speed running competitions, where people are watching this as an event unfolding live rather than a recording. And so I wanted to show a little clip from Act 2 of the play. Let's see if it'll load here.
That is all well and good, but perhaps you can untie me till then. My hands grow numb and my wrists bloody. I cannot risk. We will stick to my plan. Oh, perhaps if you knew something of my past, something of my present, you would see the humanity in letting me go. I will recount it to you and let you be the judge. Alas, it will not sway me. Once my plans are laid, they do not change. Something you must know about me if we are to be partners. It was something Francis despised. But friend, we are starting anew. No before, no Francis, only us two and our secrets. Could that alone be enough to untie me? I was a lawman myself. In fact, they are coming for you now. If you untie me, you will be spared. I've heard enough. Why did I think for a second you could be trusted? Where are you taking me? The law is coming for us now. I hear their whistles. I hear their horses. About 30 lawmen, I swear. I hear nothing but the wind, you fool. Oh, wait, I didn't mean it. I was no lawman. Please, I take it back. Ah, perhaps you are of no use to me after all. How am I ever to believe you, to ever trust you, or any living soul for that matter? You have what's left of my honor, what's left of my word. But what good is my word? I beg of you, take me back to the horse and I will lie no longer. I will complain no longer. This is your final chance to prove yourself worthy of my company. Tell me what has truly happened to Francis. Francis, he didn't abandon me. That was a lie. My final lie? Please hold your fire. Give me a reason. It was my intention that you would lose all hope in Francis and trust me instead. What have you done with Francis? Nothing at all. We were accosted in the roadway. A group took Francis and threw me to the ground. I should leave you here to die. You say for certain that they took him. Yes, and I can show you the direction. If only you untie me first. Ugh. You snake! How can I discern if any of this is true? I suppose you cannot. But as we both agreed, this place is not meant for trusting. Now, you will use me to get your darling Francis, and I will use you for my freedom. You will not regret this decision, friend. Silence.
So that was just a small piece of it. The total time of the play was about an hour long. And it was my first time kind of doing some sort of like truly like live, like kind of cinematic thing like that. So I'm currently kind of working on writing more plays in that vein to kind of experiment more with that type of medium, because I found it really generative and interesting in a way that like video, it kind of transcended video and made the I don't know, there's something about live performance that it's just a little bit more, yeah, it it kind of brings you out of yourself in a way that I find that video sometimes doesn't accomplish. So I'm going to talk now a little bit about the current installation that's up at Spaces. It's up for maybe a week more. This is the video from the installation. It's called How to Go Full Body. And basically it begins as an instructional manual on how to set up full body tracking in VR. But then it progresses into a sort of primer on becoming what the video calls the image hydra, or imagining what would be deemed like the perfect digital being, essentially like a mass of exponentially spawning limbs, images, and content, creating this crazy constellation of like spectacles within a single body. And the mythical Hydra monster is an example of this type of being, like pushed to its furthest means, where one head is cut off to grow in its place, which is mirroring like the exponential surplus of images that we generate on a daily basis, except just pushed completely to its furthest means. So the physical installation of Hydra is an extension of this idea within the video. And framing the image Hydra as both like the final boss and also a self-portrait, kind of reflecting our potential to become these like infinitely generative beings. I'm going to play just a little bit of this. So here is an installation shot of the two videos that are back there. There's actually technically 3 videos in the show, but this is sort of like a sweeping view of everything. So in Lev Manovich's The Language of New Media, he lists modularity as one of the 5 principles of new media objects. So having many functioning individual parts that make up like a larger whole. He says, quote, "In short, a new media object consists of independent parts, each of which consist of smaller independent parts, and so on and on down to the level of the smallest pixels, 3D points, or text characters." And so this installation is kind of a take on that idea. It consists of groupings of modular tentacle-like structures that make up the whole of the Hydra. And they're covered in this stretchy fabric that's this blue chroma key fabric. So it imagines like that if at any moment they could be keyed out, essentially made to like function as these conduits for images, like much like the image Hydra in the video. And so this is the final, I think this is the last video I'm going to talk about, which was also in the show. It's called Self-Portrait as the Final Boss. And it's a performance within Second Life, which was inspired by Joseph Delap's Self-Portrait as a Monster Truck from 2011. And it essentially is a Second Life avatar floating in the sky with squid tentacles affixed to like every point of the body. And so the original performance was a bunch of monster trucks affixed to his avatar, and he's walking forward slowly, and the monster trucks are all moving with his body. And so I kind of I used the tentacles, because Hydra, and the small shifts in the arms and legs of my avatar caused the squid tentacles to undulate. So I really didn't have to do a lot of movement. It sort of was already animated to do these crazy undulations. I actually can play it as I'm talking because there's no sound. And so I wanted to create this like flattened digital representation of the Hydra. And Second Life has always been this like virtual meeting place / literal like Second Life, where people can like build houses, have relationships, and live out their lives as their avatar. And so I wanted to use that mirror-like quality of Second Life, and like reference the self-portrait as a monster truck to show like how digital space can be this resonance chamber where your own visual representation of your identity and yourself can become just like another performance for the screen, and sort of repeating this image Hydra, like constantly creating images of the self. And so that's the performance. I think that might be my last slide, actually. Let me see. Okay, and here is another installation view of spaces of Hydra. And so that's the end of my talk. So if anyone has any questions, we can open it up to everybody. I can try and see if I can work this this little participants tab here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kara. So if anybody has a question or something they'd like to say, you could drop it off in the Q&A. There's a Q&A button along the bottom of the screen.
I hope I see it. I don't know. We'll see.
And if not, I'll read them out loud to you.
Okay, thanks.
I can also start off with a question. Do you see your sort of discrete works as like part of a longer thread, or are they like independent vignettes? Like how do you you know, it sort of feels like the last two pieces you showed kind of like were growing on one another, but I'm wondering if that's sort of like an ongoing thing, or if you're challenging yourself to sort of like work more in that way.
Do you mean like the live version, like the live performance stuff, or do you mean like as a whole, like the video works kind of all?
Yeah, I mean, the video works kind of all feeding into one another. You know, like I always think of like how early seasons of like a lot of cartoons and stuff like don't have any correlation, like one episode to the other, but then like they start to build that over time. And so I'm wondering if that's something that you're starting to bake more into your practice or something.
Yeah, I think, well, when I first started working on like all of the work that I made like post grad school, I was like kind of considering it all as one initial body of work, where like if I were to do some sort of like solo show, I could see them all kind of together as this like thesis kind of thing. And then I sort of never stopped working on that body of work. It's just kept going and going. Like I've never sort of like pivoted away from any of the themes or any of the like, I feel like I've just kept digging deeper into like the rabbit holes. And like you said, vignettes, I feel like that's a really good word for it, because they're not necessarily like, they're definitely they all are correlated, but they kind of exist like as these little sections of, you know, like these little pockets. Like the book I did, which I didn't talk about here, but the RPG Gothic book that I made was like a font book of a bunch of fantasy fonts that were like free to download from the internet. And I feel like that like alone is so, like, I feel like that is just kind of like an outgrowth of all of the rest of it. And it kind of all feels kind of like a Hydra. I don't kind of like all.
No, I mean, I do think, you know, like a lot of these games are classified as like world building. And I do start to think that a lot with the people who are sort of like operating in that lexicon, like when we're talking about glitches, when we're talking about these world building conditions or like augmented realities that sort of like start to feel like they are kind of like intended to take over. Like the what is, you know, like how far are you going into that world building mode in your practice, and sort of like, I guess, what's the, is there sort of a definitive line where you're starting to like feel like you're blurring reality with like fiction?
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, it's funny because like growing up, like I used to like write all the time. I was like big, like kind of like some fan fiction, but like, you know, some like original stuff. But I was like constantly writing. And I kind of had a realization at one point that I was like writing everything in the same like world, like the same AU, you know, like everything was kind of all together. And it was like this, I don't know, this like revelation that like, oh yeah, this is my world building within this self-contained thing. And I feel like that's kind of translated into my art practice. Like I like open up the door and go in, you know, to like my little like series of connected tunnels and like just kind of mine from there. And I guess that's sort of just like out of that habit of like writing as a kid. I don't know. But everything, yeah, feels like super intertwined at this point. And yeah, I'm like working on I'm working on writing a play that's like kind of about that. I've been thinking a lot about like the like history of like how I make work. And so yeah, the fiction and reality are definitely like blurring for me.
No, yeah, that's great. I think that's
Becoming,
probably, I can't wait to see that phase of your practice where you're just like totally.
I'm like, oh, this is becoming just about me. Like it's becoming very, I don't want to say meta, but like, yeah, it's all about like my life now. Like the AU, like the author within the AU, that was me, you know, and it just like keeps going. So, which is fun, but also like, I don't know, very like you're just bearing your soul at some points. So, but yeah, thanks for that was a good question, I guess. I think we have a chat.
Yes, so somebody asked, I'm curious, anonymous attendee, I'm curious about the intentions of the musical or non-diegetic
Mhm.
components of your work. How do you determine and or create the soundtrack for video pieces?
Yeah, so I actually like it's a huge part of the way that like I feel like the video is viewed. I feel like without a soundtrack, it kind of just like immediately like loses so much of like the quality that like really pulls people in, or at least for me, like when I'm watching something and there's some like swelling soundtrack in the background, I'm immediately like really like I'm like tuned in, I'm like experiencing it. Whereas if there's no soundtrack, I just kind of like, I don't know, it's not like as animated for me. And so a lot of the stuff like the last video for how to go full body was me noodling around in GarageBand. but I've actually had a couple collaborators, and most recently Justin, who I think is maybe in attendance right now. I don't know, it says Justin M, so maybe that's
Justin is here, yep.
Wow. Okay. Celebrity in the crowd. So Justin has worked on the soundtracks to a couple of the videos that were here, and they worked on the Welcome to My Desert Nexus live performance, which had some like amazing scoring to that. And I've always wanted to have some sort of like repository of all the like music that they've like worked on with the videos, because I feel like it's growing, like non-space canon beta as well. There's like so many that I like. I don't know, I feel like it's music is so essential to the process and to the piece. It kind of makes or breaks it. So it's been really great to collaborate with them. And also earlier in my work, I was sampling like kind of, what do you call it, like royalty free like music, and kind of like slowing it down, speeding it up, and chopping it apart. And I actually met someone through a royalty-free website and like asked them to like create a piece based on what they saw like in a video that I made, and like they basically composed like an ode to Lara Croft, which I should have included here. That would have been fun. But like kind of this like back and forth between people, I feel like is important for the creation of some really great soundtracks. I hope that answered the question. Now I can't see it anymore.
It was moved to the answered question of the Q&A.
Oh, nice. Okay.
But yeah, so thank you so much. Are there any other questions? If not, we can probably stop recording and say thanks to everyone for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, please, if anybody else has a question, please feel free to leave it. But I was wondering, because you brought up playwriting, and I know just from previous conversations, talking about like your how that factors into your practice, and I kind of saw it play out a bit in like the dialogue of some of your characters, and in the case of, you know, Jim Carrey's monologue. I'm wondering, I think it's just so interesting because the playwriting kind of piece of your practice is feels like it's very collaborative, and like you were just describing your kind of like collaborative work with Justin and friends that you make on the internet, when like so much of the work is kind of about this like alienated kind of like singular these like alienated experiences. Could you talk a little bit about your interest in playwriting and maybe where you might see that going?
Yeah, I feel like so much of like the way that I work is like informed by like an early experience of the internet and like fan culture and like fandom, and like the way that that is both really collaborative, can be really collaborative, and also very like alienating at the same time. So like you have this huge community of people surrounding a text, and then there's also like just you nerding out in your room by yourself, you know. And so that like push and pull between those two extremes, I feel like is where I'm coming from a little bit. And the playwriting like came out of like literally writing like literally like plays from like the characters of Lord of the Rings, like just like, oh, what if they're in this situation, what if they're in that situation, and like kind of coming out of that, and then like posting that to like a forum somewhere, you know, and then getting like feedback on it. So I feel like in that way, like it's extremely collaborative. And then like now working with people who are like acting in the plays, it's like it's like a surreal but like really gratifying experience to have that like collaboration, and then also like get feedback from like actually hearing your words be like said out loud is like pretty cool. And then in the future, yeah, I'm writing this play. I've like written like 17 pages in like 3 days. I'm freaking out. I don't know what's going on. So I'm really excited. And I want to keep using this live element that's like both live and like this like Twitch stream experience, and this like conversation that includes the chat as like this like autonomous being kind of that you're kind of beholden to as someone who's streaming. Like you kind of have this like relationship with the chat even though you don't know every single person you're talking to, and kind of like that relationship, which is also like this collaborative / alienating thing. So that's kind of in the works as well. I hope that kind of answered your question.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Thank you, Kara.
Yeah. And then I need to stop recording too. But yeah, thanks everybody for coming. This has been super great. Oh, thank you. Thank you in the comments.
Agreed. This was a pleasure, and it's a bit of a pleasure like having your work physically at Spaces too. So I do urge everybody. I'm not sure how many folks attending are from Columbus or are from Cleveland, but if people can make it to the show before June 3rd, that would be amazing. Yeah. Otherwise, thank you so much, Kara. Does anybody else have anything to add? Tiziana?
No, just thank you. Thanks all for attending, and have a great Thursday night. Thank you, Kara.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.